But I wanted to talk about the wide receivers here off the top of the show. The Patriots, the big report for New England here today on Tuesday, Armando Salguero from the Outkick now, I think it is. He used to be down there in Florida reporting on the Dolphins. Now he's national media.
I don't think it's the Outkick. I think it's just Outkick.
Outkick. He reported that the Patriots have a very important task, or kind of their priority in Indianapolis, is to meet with the three of the top receivers in the NFL draft, basically the guys that are going to be in shouting distance of the 21st pick. Talking about Chris Olave from Ohio State, Jameson Williams from Alabama, who obviously won't participate in drills due to the torn ACL, but is participating in meetings with teams, and Treylon Burks from Arkansas as well. All three of these guys, I would say, are very different skill set wise. Olave, the pure technician, route runner. Williams, the absolute game-breaking speed, Tyreek Hill level, Jalen Waddle level speed. And then Burks, who I think a lot of us are in agreement that you would like the Patriots to stay away from that kind of profile that does profile a little bit like N'Keal Harry did, but is certainly a lot more explosive and faster than N'Keal Harry was in the open field in college. But before we get into individual breakdowns on all three guys and who we would prefer, because we're going to do that, I first want to discuss the fact that they're meeting with these three guys. And I don't want to make too much out of these meetings, but I do think on the heels of Mike Giardi's report a couple of weeks ago that the Patriots internally are talking about adding a number one wide receiver to their offense. Now they're meeting with three of the best wide receivers in the draft at the combine. It feels like they are searching for that number one wideout.
Almost feels like the uncharacteristically aggressive report from last year, doesn't it?
Right.
Where you're starting to kind of see all these breadcrumbs. And those are, I mean, those would be the guys. Those, I've said this, like Jameson Williams, if he was healthy, would be my number one. With him not being healthy, I think Olave, at least in terms of the Patriots, is my number one right now. Yeah. So that's exciting. We only know about 5 meetings. All 5 have been with wide receivers. Those 3 haven't happened yet. They're expected to happen. And then they met with Dubs and Christian Watson, who both sort of fit that same profile of not just number one receiver, but, Olave, I guess, is different. Olave could play pretty much anywhere. It depends on how you want to use him. But Burks, Williams, at least at the NFL level, Williams, and then Dubs and Watson, those are all X, outside the numbers, down, deep threat receivers. Olave's kind of his own thing. I'm not saying he can't do that. He's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah.
But they're clearly sniffing around the same sort of player here. And whether it's the first round, whether it's later rounds. So that, you mentioned the Giardi report. I think, boom, the lights are flashing right there. They're signaling to us what they're thinking. Whether or not they ultimately do it, we'll see. But remember last year, there's a lot of reports about them sniffing around quarterbacks. And we said, they won't do it because they never do the most obvious thing. And then they made the most chalk pick possible. So assuming Olave gets to 21, he's the most chalk pick possible to me. Again, Williams is his own thing because he has the torn ACL. Olave is the most chalk pick at 21. Do they do it again in 2 years in a row?
So I do think that there's a combination of maybe the uncharacteristically aggressive report and what they typically do. And when I look at it, Jameson Williams at 21, even with the ACL, I think they're going to look at as tremendous value because that's probably a player that would be a top 10 pick if he was healthy. They've gone down that path before. It hasn't always been successful. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when a player falls, whether it's due to injury or due to some other circumstances, the Patriots have been one of those teams in the past that have grabbed that player and bet on the talent. Jameson Williams would 100% bet on the talent type of prospect. He's my wide receiver one in the draft. He's the one guy that I look at and say, if healthy, can come into your offense and be an instant star, not just an instant contributor, but an instant star, like Jamar Chase level type of impact coming into the offense because of his speed and his game breaking ability. Chris Olave is the technician. He's the most polished, probably the most pro ready, if you want to use that draft term, out of this group. And he can, as you said, Alex, run routes from multiple alignments, which I do think Jameson can do it a little bit too. He can run inside or run outside, but I think Olave, from a just a technique standpoint and route detail standpoint, is probably the receiver that understands what he's going to be asked to do in the Patriots offense the most, because of the way that Ohio State runs their scheme and because of the way that he runs the routes on the route tree that they asked him to run. There's nice overlap there. And you also look at the fact that a lot of reports out there have said that the Patriots could potentially trade for Calvin Ridley. I would say the best comparison for Chris Olave is probably Calvin Ridley, right? So instead of going with the older player that has 1 year left on his contract, that does have some mental health issues that you have to iron out, they could go with Olave, whose profile is basically the same as what Calvin Ridley does from a skill set standpoint. You got to mention with Olave, he is a vertical route runner. This is not Julian Edelman. This is not Wes Welker. Right? This is somebody that gets up the field. He can get up the field in a hurry. He's got really good initial burst off the line of scrimmage to threaten defensive backs, but he's also very, very clean at the top of the route and probably the best route break receiver in this entire draft, just in terms of the limited wasted movement at the top of the route, right? A lot of these other guys takes you a couple steps to gather, break, plant, do that sort of thing. Olave is in and out, right? I mean, he's really quick in and out of the break. We got to talk about Treylon Burks, though, because this guy, to me, is not N'Keal Harry. But I understand why a lot of fans that watch Treylon Burks' highlights, that go through some of his film, or even read up on Treylon Burks, are going to say, this is exactly like N'Keal Harry. The concern that I have with that line of thinking is, one, Burks is going to run in probably the 4.3s, right? So he's quite a bit faster than N'Keal Harry was. N'Keal Harry is a mid 4.5s guy. This is a 4.3s guy at 225. He's a difference maker with the ball in his hands. The other thing I would mention is, if you're so weary of not making the same mistake twice on N'Keal Harry, then that's how you missed on AJ Brown, right? Because N'Keal Harry and AJ Brown coming out, there wasn't a ton of difference in their profiles. The difference was that AJ Brown was a more explosive athlete, and that's how we ended up here. So I would just be wary of the fact that you could run into a position where all of a sudden you miss out on the next AJ Brown, or you miss out on the next Deebo Samuel, because you're so concerned about not drafting the next Harry, if that makes sense.
But see, I think something you said there kind of proves my point, in that how similar Harry and Brown were coming out of the draft. It's that nature versus nurture thing. Like, this is a big thing in psychology. How do you study how change affects people? They try to find twins who grew up in separate, environments to see, okay, well, how is this going to work? It's almost like that, right? You kind of took the same player, the same raw skill set, and you put them in two environments. And what happened? You got N'Keal Harry, you got AJ Brown. It's not about when you say, when we say, oh, well, I'm worried Treylon Burks would end up like N'Keal Harry, that doesn't really have a lot to do with Treylon Burks. It's more so, we saw a player of this prototype in New England very recently. How did it turn out? I think if Burks lands in the right spot, he'll be a fantastic NFL player. I really do. I like him as a player. I just don't think that spot is New England. I would rather see them, and they may not have this choice. I highly doubt both of these guys are on the board at 21. I really don't think either is going to be on the board at 21. But just for argument's sake, I would, if they had to choose between the two, I would rather see them go with a guy like Olave, because he's going to fit in more seamlessly. And we talked about this on the last show, Evan, in terms of Wan'Dale Robinson, right? How you're weary about Wan'Dale because there's not really a role for him in the current offense as it exists. And you're not confident with the fact that they'll be able to create that role for him. That's basically how I feel about Burks. Even if he is an electric athlete, I just see them having him go out there and running curls 20 times a game, because that's what they did with N'Keal Harry, right? So,
or verticals where he's trying to win on contested catches all the time, or something like that. Yeah.
Give me the guy who I know can fit in seamlessly, can take over a role that already exists and master it, instead of a guy that they've got to carve out a new role for.
I'm on the same page as you. I like to play devil's advocate because I love Treylon Burks as a prospect, right? I think he's going to be a fantastic player.
Yeah.
When I evaluated the draft with N'Keal Harry in 2019, I had Harry and AJ Brown closer than I should have, right? I thought that they profiled pretty similar. I thought they both had the same strengths and weaknesses. What I slept on was that AJ Brown was a much better athlete than N'Keal Harry, right? Because N'Keal Harry looked like a good athlete, but he wasn't actually as translatable as an athlete and explosiveness in the open field as AJ Brown. AJ Brown ran a much better 40 time. I'm just expecting Treylon Burks to run an even better 40 time than AJ Brown did. So that's, to me, where I'm coming at with that. But I'm with you that I would prefer Olave and Jameson over Treylon Burks for the reasons that you laid out. The fact that we have seen that player, the Treylon Burks player, fail multiple times here in New England with them trying to go after that kind of guy, right? And they haven't been able to figure it out. And I would also mention that early on in Treylon Burks' career, he's going to have some scheme touch elements to his game, right? Jet sweeps, screens, just finding ways to manufacture touches. And I'm not sure with their current offensive coaching staff that I'm going to fully trust Joe Judge and Matt Patricia to be able to scheme touches for Treylon Burks. It's the same, like you said, it's the same thing as Wan'Dale Robinson just a little bit earlier in the draft.
But we remember we said that about N'Keal Harry too. How long were we waiting for them to run all these tunnel screens with N'Keal Harry and the pop pass and and even Jonnu Smith now? Like, I just think we're going to be sitting here in 6 months or whatever it is talking about, well, why aren't they getting him the ball? Why aren't they figuring out ways to get him the ball? Whereas Chris Olave and their offense is going to be a magnet for the football.
Thanks for watching our content of the 6-time Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. Please subscribe to my podcast, Patriots Beat, on our YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass, or wherever you get your podcasts for a lot more exclusive content right here on the CLNS Media Network.